The nation of Portugal emerged out of the shadows after liberating themselves from Muslim rule. They would conquer the great city of Ceuta and conduct a series of expeditions that would change the world. Following the conquest of Ceuta, Prince Henrique of Portugal began to sponsor expeditions down the western coastline of Africa, in search of gold, spices and slaves. Voyage by voyage, Portuguese explorers continued south along the coast and began to map the shape of a continent. Each voyage was characterised by several vessels, carrying a few soldiers armed with crossbows and crabbed swords, ready to reach unknown shores. The vessels themselves, known as Caravan, were developed by the Portuguese. They were small with limited space for supplies, but had triangular sails that could sail against the wind in a zigzag fashion, allowing faster travel. The city of Lisbon became the frontier of exploration, where caravels would return with slaves, gold, ivory, handcrafted maps and beautifully coloured parrots. Portuguese motivations for exploration were mixed. Portugal was a relatively resource-poor nation, relying mostly on trade to grow. There was a distinct lack of manpower as the population was small, numbering less than 2 million people. Henrique himself was motivated by medieval cartographers who showed it was possible to reach the legendary kingdom of Mansa Musa, who ruled the extremely wealthy kingdom of Mali early in the 14th century. Exploration of Africa halted for a while upon Henrique's death, until Prince João pushed for more projects in the 1470s. When João became king as João II in 1481, he had a desire to do great deeds. He began to fund many explorers to complete two objectives. The first was to bypass trade around their despised Muslim enemies, the Ottomans. The second reason was to seek out a legendary Christian king, Prester John, to link up and help them in a crusade. One of these explorers was Diogo Coe, who journeyed further along the west coast of Africa, planting a series of pillars engraved with the Portuguese coat of arms. Diogo Coe sailed up the uncharted Congo River and became the first European to encounter the Congo Kingdom. Initially, good relations were established with the Congo Kingdom, and it became a major source of slaves for Portuguese traders. For all his achievements, Diogo Coe failed to find a route around Africa, and he supposedly died of malaria while sailing up the Congo River on his second voyage. Upon hearing the news of Coe's death, João II appointed a knight of his household, Bartolomeu Dias, to command the next expedition. With two caravels and a storage ship, Dias sailed down the coast of Africa and became the first European to sail around South Africa, but no further. He named this region the Cape of Storms, although it would later be changed to the Cape of Good Hope by the king. Dias returned to Lisbon with his battered caravels after a 16-month voyage and revived the idea that it was still possible to reach the Indies via sea route and ultimately reach the source of the spice trade. The man who would accomplish the sea route to India was Vasco da Gama. For his first voyage in July 1497, he set sail from Lisbon with 4 ships down the western coast of Africa, but unlike previous explorers, he sailed out into the southern Atlantic. From here he used the prevailing southern winds to stir past the Cape of Good Hope and sail up the east coast of Africa. He stopped at Mozambique for a while before resorting to piracy at Mombasa, looting several Arab merchant ships who were unarmed and slow. At the town of Malindi, good relations were established. Together they signed a trade agreement and received a guide for the voyage to India. The ship set sail and they arrived at the Indian trading port of Calicut on the 20th of May 1498. Upon his arrival, Gama met with the ruler of Calicut in an effort to establish commercial trade terms. Vasco da Gama presented goods but proved insufficient to impress the ruler and his representatives. This conflict of interest and hostility from Muslim traders led da Gama to leave without concluding a treaty, although they did eventually manage to trade. The Portuguese sold their goods at a low price in order to acquire small amounts of spices and jewels. Upon his return to Portugal, Vasco da Gama was welcomed as a hero. He had sailed 24,000 miles, 54 of the 170 crew returned home, but the goods he had brought back from India made profits 60 times that of his journey. Such was the success that King Manuel ordered a much larger fleet to sail to India under the command of Pedro Álvares Cabral. Pedro's instructions were simple: to capitalise on da Gama's discoveries and secure a trading post at Calicut. Upon his arrival, however, Pedro would see 50 of his men murdered by Muslim traders. He would retaliate by burning 10 Muslim cargo vessels and killing the nearly 600 sailors aboard, before moving on to Cochin, where he established the first Portuguese trading post in India. This would not be the end of Pedro's explorations though, as he in fact managed to discover Brazil. King Manuel ordered Vasco da Gama to dispatch a second voyage in 1502. Vasco da Gama set sail for India again with a fleet of 20 ships, but this time he forced his way into the markets. The Portuguese fleet bombarded the city for nearly 2 days, severely damaging the unfortified city. After attacking a number of Arab merchant ships, he reached an agreement with Calicut's ruler and made peace. On their return voyage along the East African coast, they established Portuguese trading posts in what is now Mozambique. Vasco da Gama would return to India for a third and final time, becoming the Viceroy of India. But soon after his arrival he contracted malaria and died in the city of Cochin. Further explorations were continued by the Portuguese and they reached Malacca and Japan, and it is also speculated that the Portuguese discovered Australia and Canada. Ferdinand Magellan also supposedly circumnavigated the globe under the patronage of Spain, but he didn't really because he died in Indonesia, but his fleet did manage to make it back to Spain. However, Portugal would never truly be able to take control of the Indian Ocean spice trade network. Instead, they captured and controlled a number of coastal cities and set up trading posts, laying the foundations for the Portuguese Empire. Vasco da Gama had opened the sea route to reach India for Europeans and in doing so placed the steps for colonisation and globalisation.